Hi, I'm Mitch McDonald with DC Velocity and CSCMP Supply Chain Quarterly. We're with you today for a particularly timely conversation about current issues in the motor freight industry, and most specifically within the LTL carrier segment. As we so often do, when important discussions on these matters are needed, we turn to some of the lead subject matter experts in the field, and today we have two for you. First, we have Mike Regan, who's co-founder and Chief Relationship Development Officer at Transact, as well as Doug Culbertson, who's Director of Freedom Logistics. But what's happening in the LTL industry right now is not only a great example of constant change, but it's perhaps change unlike anything we've seen or you and I have spoken about in the past, with issues of capacity, rates, volumes, all those sorts of things. Today, it just feels different than it really ever has. Starting with you, Mike, just what's your current sense of what's going on? What's happening in that sector today?
Well, Mitch, first of all, I think it's imperative for shippers to understand that we have seen a real significant shift in a couple of things that are driving some extraordinary changes in the marketplace. Let me cut right to the chase. Right now, the system is quote unquote flush with freight, and the carriers have a tremendous amount of data. And practically speaking, one of the CEOs of a major carrier told me, Mike, we have trucks, shippers need trucks. We will be able to charge what we need to charge in order for them to use their trucks. Put another way, and this is a rule that I think a lot of LTL shippers need to really process and think about. In a buyer-seller's market, right now it is a seller's market. And as that CEO said, shippers need carriers more than carriers need shippers. And we've periodically gone through those types of things, 2004, 2005, 2018. But this one is different. And it's different because in 2021, what I referred to a moment ago as the carriers having the data, they are now using that data as an integral part of their decision-making process in deciding what we're going to charge with our rates. Darren Hawkins is a friend of mine, and he's the CEO of YRC. And over at transact.com, one of the things that we did in an interview with him, he said, Mike, what shippers need to know is that with dimensionalizers, we know down to the inch how much space your freight is taking on our trailers. And with a combination of electronic logging devices, along with some GPS devices that the carriers are using, we know exactly how much time we're spending down to the minute to pick up and deliver your freight. So if I know the space and I know the time, and I have all this kind of financial data that's reflected in my operating ratio, the carrier can ask a question. What do I need to charge in order for this freight to be profitable? And those are new rules, at least to the extent that they're being applied in the industry today.
In the LTL space, not only do we have an organic growth in that area, but we also have bleed over of the heavy parcel and the light truckload into the LTL market, which is really, really impacting. And so every carrier that I've talked to, from the lower quality carriers to the upper quality carriers, they're running at 110 to 125% of capacity, which means that the service levels are not what we're used to seeing.
Sure.
And that they can charge about anything that they want to service those accounts, meaning that they're using their costing models, which Mike mentioned, to make sure that they're covering all of their costs, plus getting whatever profitability that they deem that is necessary in this market.
I'd like to circle back in a minute on the data question, because I think that's worthy of a little bit more exploration. But first, sort of a two-part jump ball of a question, if you will, gentlemen. First, I want to ask you to look into your near-term crystal ball and tell shippers exactly what they need to know, in your view, for the balance of 2020. But sort of the add-on to that question, how much of the current circumstance is a result of emerging from a pandemic, as opposed to how much of it is deeply ingrained market conditions that were happening whether the pandemic occurred or not?
There are things that shippers can do to positively influence those activity-based costing models. If you choose to ignore those things as a shipper, you're too busy, your docks aren't important enough for you to actually run them well, and a whole host of other things, and you impose requirements on this, you're sending carriers into high-cost delivery zones. Let me make it as simple as I possibly can, Mitch. For every shipper that hears this, please get this straight. You're going to pay higher freight costs because the carriers have the data and they're going to increase their rates in order to get them to do what you want them to do. It's that simple.